All right, we'll call this session of the Finance Committee to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
Tom Wilson,
Here.
Sarah Whitney,
Here.
Paul Carmella,
Here.
Joe Hitzelsberger,
Here?
Kristen Rooney,
Here.
Robert McPherson,
Here.
and Al Dow.
Here.
Okay, and first item is the consent agenda. Any changes? It's just the minutes, but, or I'll look for a motion.
And just to comment, the minutes for the October 16th, you're really only approving the little section that was the Finance Committee part.
I was at both of those, and the minutes look good. I'll move approval
Okay,
as presented.
got a motion? Any seconds?
I'll second.
And a second?
Discussion? I don't think I was there at the October 16th meeting. Oh, maybe I'm looking at the,
I believe you were at the August 21st, but not at the October 16th.
that is correct, yes. I would think it might have been the hospital. I don't see the list of attendees. I guess I was looking at the board. Anyway, I wasn't there. So, I mean,
At October 16th.
October 16th, correct.
Corrected?
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
Then,
if, in the section, neither Al or Paul was in attendance on October 16th. You have to look down.
It's the village board meeting, so it's the attendance
Yeah.
is there, so they're okay.
Groovy.
okay, perfect. Okay, so any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we have passed our minutes. On to the first order of new business, that's approve resolution designating public depositories and authorizing withdrawal of Village of Wanakee deposits. Renee?
So this is a resolution we do each year. The state requires us to designate our depositories, and it has been village practice to designate all financial institutions that are within the village limits. We bank with a number of these institutions already, but just in case something would come up, we get all the institutions in the village and then any investment companies that we work with, local government investment pool, and some of our brokers and things. So, again, this is standard that we do every year.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, questions?
Questions?
All communities do this.
Yep.
It's perfectly appropriate, and I think it's right to have the institutions that are there. So I'll move that we recommend approval of this resolution as it's presented to us, to the board.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second has been made. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries as well. On to the second item of business. Discuss and take action on resolution approving the carry forward of unexpended 2023 appropriations and assignment of fund balance. Renee?
Okay, this is, again, another resolution that we do each year, but what we have in the resolution varies from year to year. So shortly after December 31st, I reach out to all the departments and ask them if they have maybe items they didn't have time to do, or maybe their priorities shifted, and they have unexpended funds that they'd like to carry over into 2024 to complete those projects. So a couple that I just wanted to mention. So we have some that are standard, like our elections line item. So we budget pretty smoothly over a 4-year period, and then we carry over any unused money primarily to be used in a presidential year. Likewise, our assessment services in the past, again, we budgeted smoothly over a number of years, and then every so often we would do a revaluation. And then we would use those funds. Now, this is kind of the leftover from our old contract, and then our new contract, now we have I believe it's a 5-year term, a fixed amount over those 5 years, and we will be getting revalued every other year. So we will be tapping into some of this to help smooth that transition, and probably over the next couple years, to help with the budget on that because it was an increase over our previous 5-year contract. Otherwise, another new one, the stormwater survey work of about 17,000. We actually got a settlement from Monsanto, I think related to Roundup and PCBs. And so we have to use it for specific purposes. And they didn't get anything going in 2023 for that, so we carried that forward because we have to spend it on those purposes. So that's kind of a new one. Yeah, otherwise, community development has a number of them. Again, just some things that just didn't happen in 2023, or maybe they needed a couple years to build up enough money to do a project. So there's a number of things in that area, but happy to answer any questions on those. Anybody?
Just in that general fund section, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Al?
Yeah, and I can see what you're doing, but one of the questions I would have is, for example, on the Wannaboom Other, as an illustration, why would we carry over unexpended funds from Wannaboom, given that that should be an annual event that you make money, you lose money, you spend money, but why would you want to carry that over to create a bigger pot of money for 2024's Wannaboom? Is there a reason
So-
for it? And that's just an illustration.
Yeah, so it is particularly large for this carryover because in 2023, we had actually budgeted 30,000 in the budget. Previously, it had never had a budget item. It was all fundraising, but we were uncertain if we'd be able to reach the same fundraising goals, and so 30,000 was budgeted in 2023. The fundraising did, we generated enough in fundraising to cover all of Wannaboom's costs and still have about
5,000.
9,600 left over, and then 30,000 from the budget. So in 2024, we did not put anything in the budget for Wannaboom. So if our funding, our donations start to drop off, that's when we would tap into this. So historically, it's always been donated money. This year, we added 30,000 that had been in the budget that wasn't needed. Does that, I don't think it answers your question exactly, but that's what makes it up.
I'm not necessarily disagreeing, it's that I like to see the money being spent every year and the fundraising being, let me back up, the expenses being budgeted for every year and the fundraising being estimated every year. You're kind of mixing now the expected fundraising in 2024 with now a carryover of 2023's income or expenses. So in reality, the budget is zero. Now we go into 2025 and you stick a $30,000 expense in there and now you just increase the budget $30,000 at that point in time. So it gets to be a little bit of a mismatch and a budgeting issue when you don't match up the revenue with the expenses. That's the concern I have.
Yeah, and again, historically, we have not budgeted either revenue or expense because if the fundraising hadn't been there in the past, they would have cut back on what they offered. The 30,000 was really to cover the fireworks should something happen with the other fundraising. So,
I just don't.
yeah, we can talk about that at budget time,
Yeah, okay.
perhaps to have that committee come up with more estimates to put into the budget.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
I'll ask, and maybe this is to Todd and to Kristen, the 24,000 for strategic planning. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, we need microphones for this, or not?
Yes, you do, because we are recording.
It's recorded.
Oh, okay. For a couple of years, we budgeted to afford the board the opportunity to do strategic planning for one reason or another, or several reasons. That wasn't accomplished in the given year. I think we budgeted 2 years. We might have budgeted 2 years and then,
I think there's maybe even 3 years in there. Some of it was used for a small item, but the
Right.
bulk not.
but the wish or the desire for that activity for the board was maintained. We stopped budgeting for it and instead carried this over with the thought, hope, that the board would have the opportunity to do this sort of work together at some point. So that's where, that's what it's been waiting for.
And with the comp plan on the horizon too, if we had a conversation as a board about kind of what direction are we going in as a community, I think that's going to be a really good use of our resources and a really good use of our time.
Okay, any other questions on the general fund?
Well, if you're, okay, no, I don't, I'm sorry. On the
Okay.
general fund, you said.
Yep.
Senior Center, they have, they often get donations toward their dementia-friendly programs, and so they'll use some of that during the year, but whatever is left of those donations, we carry forward. I think that one's pretty straightforward. In the Village Center, similar for Live from the Park, they have sponsors and donations. And what hasn't been used in the 2023, they carry over toward the next year. The capital outlay lines, so you may recall that a car drove into the Village Center and did a significant amount of damage. So we got the insurance money for that, but they were not able to complete all the repairs, particularly the window replacement, until 2024. And then because of having to replace other things and do work in that area, they weren't able to purchase all the equipment they had planned for in 2023, just because it was all happening toward the end of the year and they had to prioritize and fix that area as best they could. And then the programming one is just a patron of the Village Center donated $500. They wanted to go towards the 2024 programs. Any questions on those two? I think those are pretty straightforward. And then the equipment replacement fund, so the senior center, there's been kind of a, it's been hard to get their furniture reupholstered. It's just a very few vendors that can do the work, and so they've been on a list, or however, they've been trying to get their furniture reupholstered. That did not happen, just because of the demand for the service, so they're hoping to get that done in 2024. The next piece is the assignment of the general fund for the accumulated sick leave conversions. That's just over $1 million. So on page 14 of 18 of the packet is the estimate of anybody who is eligible for a sick leave conversion, which are generally people that were hired prior to 2013, and then those in the union, the police union, are eligible for that benefit. So then I estimate what their sick leave is at the end of '23 and what it would cost to make those conversions to the HRA account for them, and estimating when they would likely retire. And then we set that money aside so that when somebody does retire, we have it available.
Okay. Tom?
Is this part of the same resolution? Is this part of the same resolution? I guess I said that twice.
Yes, you did.
I mean, is this something?
It is, yep.
Okay.
There's the top part, be it hereby resolved, and then be it further resolved. So because they're all kind of assignments of fund balance. One, we just term
Okay,
carryovers.
I see, sorry about
And
that.
then the others are just setting aside,
So you've got a balance and then you're just estimating over the years how you're gonna use that balance.
yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you, now I got it.
Okay, other questions?
Just a point of clarification, is this listed as a liability then on the balance sheet, or is it an assignment to the fund balance?
It is an assignment of the fund balance. It is a liability on the government-wide statements. So governmental accounting, for those who aren't as familiar, we have the fund statements, which are on the modified accrual basis. A liability does not show on there for debt or long-term, any long-term obligations or any capital assets. Those are not on the normal books of the village, but then we're required under GASB 34 to convert that and essentially show a full accrual called government-wide statements, which would show all the assets, including capital assets, and all the liabilities, including debt, and this type of a liability on those government-wide.
And the governmental-wide financials are what's reported to the public.
Well, all of it's reported to the public, but those are the first 2 pages essentially of the financial statements.
So here's what I'm getting at is I know we love conservatism within the accounting world, but you haven't done any present value calculations or any of that kind of stuff. And I don't know if the calculations were based on today's wages times the earned accrued sick leave hours, and as wages go up, this goes up as well, so you're adjusting more or less for inflation at that point in time, okay, so yes is what you're nodding, and that it is in today's dollars.
That is what the governmental standards require. They don't
Okay.
require you to project what the wages will be upon retirement. It's just based on what they are at the end of the
And
year.
that makes sense to me. Okay.
Okay, any additional questions? Not seeing any, I will look for a motion.
Oh, let me just mention the 200,000. So that's been that's the very bottom after the accumulated sick leave part of the resolution, we have set aside for a couple of years, 200,000 in case one of our joint ventures has an unexpected cost, the fire district or EMS, where they come and say, it's an emergency, it happened with these air packs a few years ago, and so we kind of keep a little money ready for an unexpected joint venture. So that's what that 200,000 is on that. So nothing new there, it's just a renewal of that assignment.
Okay. Any last questions or a motion?
Motion to recommend the village board approve the resolution approving the carry forward of unexpended 2023 appropriations and assignment of fund balance.
Okay, motion by Robert, and do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Sarah. Any additional discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. And on to the last one. Discuss and take action on resolution approving fund transfers and budget amendments.
Yeah, so I think most of you were here last year. I tried to make it easier to go through this year. First of all, for those who might remember, the debits and credits were kind of backwards last year for those accountants in the room. So I've changed that, because it always bothered me. I don't know. And then I also, on the table, put one with some colors on it.
You are not helping Al one.
Yeah, you aren't.
Well, can you not see any color?
No, I can't.
Okay, well, I apologize for that.
That's okay.
Would it help if I hold it up from here?
No, then I can't see.
I'll have to do letters or something next year.
It's fine, you're fine.
But, so essentially, governmental accounting, or really the Wisconsin statutes require us to not exceed our budget. And so there are areas, though, where we do exceed our budget for various reasons. And so we do this end-of-year budget amendment and transfer any funds if needed to cover those overages. And so with the colorful one, sorry again to Al, but it's trying to show you kind of the matchup or how they are being paid for. So for example, inspection services was significantly over budget by 117,000. Well, there's more construction, we don't budget, we never know exactly how many inspections are going to be needed. So we were over budget, but then the top two lines, the permit fees cover that extra cost. I'm going to skip back to developer fees. But the streets, snow and ice, there's a bunch in that area, parks. So the Public Works Department, they work in various areas. They, typically in the winter, they're doing more snow work. But if we have a light winter, we have, they might be doing tree trimming in the parks. So whereas streets was quite a bit over budget, we were under budget in other areas, snow and ice, parks, to cover those costs. Now, back to the developer fees and rebills. So as developers come to us in the village, they want to put forth a project, they're required to pay extra legal costs, engineering associated with those projects. So Strand or Stafford will bill us, and then we will rebill the developer. So the more developer work, the more we have to pay, but then we get that back. And so we never know. The past few years have been pretty heavy. We've had much lighter years in those areas. Those fees that we collect offset the extra billings that we have to pay. So that's the 780,000. Down toward the bottom are the other funds. So particularly, I wanted to point out the TIF districts. It's pretty natural to be over budget, especially in the early years of a TIF. And, sometimes the projects don't exactly land where they were planned for in the project plan. But like TIF 6, which is Fund 406, street construction, we hadn't originally planned to do Simon Crestway, but that was charged to TIF 6. The TID planning in Fund 409, which is TIF 9, that was the costs to do the newcomer amendment in the fall. And then TID 10, which is Fund 410, those were the costs to create the new TID 10 at the end of last year. So you see a lot down in those TIF areas. Again, nothing unusual there. We've had different presentations on the status of the TIFs, and they're all projected to do okay by, as they continue on. Questions on this specifically?
All right. Questions?
I do.
Yep.
And let me just start with your last comment, and that's about the TIDs. And I see, for example, in TID 10, there's 13,500 for TID planning. Does that include, or should it include, all of the staff time and all the committee time that goes into that, and not just hard dollars to lawyers and ailers and other folks, but should there be more costs allocated from the village to the TIDs?
So we do allocate some essentially overhead costs, staff time, to each of the TIDs, because there's work that we do, even if it's a TID that's almost closed or is closed, I still have to file reports and things like that. So we do charge each of the TIDs for some of that time. Now, committee time, no, we have not really factored that in.
I just know one municipality who's very aggressive in allocating administrative time to their TID. And I'm not suggesting we become aggressive, but realistic would be more appropriate term. But let me ask another question then, as long as I got the mic on and it's hot. Explain the transfers out, and I was expecting to see transfer in to see the other side of the entry. But I see it all transfer, there's one small transfer in, but otherwise transfer out, transfer out, transfer out. Where are those transfers going?
Let's see. Okay, are you talking like Fund 430?
Let's just take the general fund, account 5920001, 900, transfer out. It was at 75, it's now raised, additionals 93,188 to 168,188.
Okay, so the transfer out in the general fund is made up of a couple different pieces. Because there's only one transfer out account. So the general fund was budgeted to transfer 75,000, which was 20,000 to the equipment replacement and 55,000 to the capital projects fund. So where it went over is there's a transfer in down second from the bottom. So that's the equipment replacement fund. So they needed 70,000, and what that was two of our engines in our dump trucks failed. It was, they're fairly old, but there was also like a manufacturer type well-known defect. So we needed to rebuild those engines because the dump truck itself was fine, just not the engine. So 70,000 of that 93,000 of the transfer out, those offset. The other piece, I think that I had a mistake in the budget where I had one side budgeted but not the other. So one side was over budget but not the other.
Yeah, and I'm okay with what you've spoken about so far. Let's go down to the park impact fees of $181,000 transfer, unexpected transfer out now. We're asking to amend the budget to pick up $181,000 transfer out. Is that just because the fees came in higher than expected?
So what that one is during 2023, we were looking at our impact fees. Well, first of all, yes, the impact fees came in a lot more than budget. And so we were looking at how can we spend these, because they have they have to be spent generally now within 10 years of when you collect them. So we were kind of looking at what can we spend it on so we don't end up having to refund those. And so I believe the 181,000 went towards Scenic Valley. I wish like Bill was here. I think it was the Scenic Valley, like a shelter. It's not like a formal shelter. It's more of a, what do you call those? Like a, have you been to Scenic Valley?
Don't even know where it is.
It's just it's got a roof and some sides, like a more of a picnic type, kind of like a pergola essentially. So we checked with our consultants to make sure that would be TIF eligible because there are no improvements in Scenic Valley Park.
You mean impact fee?
Sorry, yes, impact fee eligible. And so that was in Fund 426. So that one was not over budget. So that's why it doesn't show on here. But we used the impact fees that we had collected to transfer from the impact fee fund to where it could be spent in the capital projects fund for the parks.
Okay, I'm off the transfers. Now, one more topic and
Okay.
then I'll be done, I think.
No, the transfers are a very confusing piece if you don't have all the sides of them.
Yeah, and I appreciate the description you gave me, so. The next one, I touched upon it once before, and that's Wanna Boom Other, that line item where we did have a budget of 50,284. We are increasing that budget another 44,560 for a budget of 94,844. And now of that, we're gonna move over whatever the top number was that we talked previously about. We're gonna move roughly $40,000 into 2024, accrue and pay that for 2024. I assume that's in that number, but, and I'm trying to tie in with what you said, we didn't budget for, and now in 2024, we're not gonna, we did in 2023, but we're not in 2024. So I'm just trying to tie all these pieces together.
Yeah. So the Wanna Boom Other line, that includes the carryover from the prior year. So when you do the carryover resolution, that becomes a budget amendment to the following year. And so we had originally budgeted 30,000 on that line, as I mentioned, for the fireworks, if we needed it. And then there was 20,284 of donations that had been carried over from the previous year. For a total of, before any new donations, 50,284. They spent 94,844, so we needed to use, obviously, some of the current year donations to pay for those.
They spent all but 40,000, which is being carried over to 2024.
Correct.
Okay, and again, my comment then lies when I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see the revenue match up with the expenses and understand we're gonna be off. Use it or lose it, kinda, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, I'm done. It's all yours.
Okay, with Al being done,
Oh, looks like Tom has a question.
we'll move on to Tom, I guess.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm doing
Yep.
this to you because I know you've got another meeting coming up. I'm just
Oh, we
curious
got
about.
plenty of time.
I'm just curious about the timing. Is this normally when you would do this budget amendment?
Probably normally the first meeting in April. So I wait till after the audit is complete.
Right.
There were no journal entries, so it didn't impact this anyway. But when I look back, last year I did it April 3rd. At that meeting, this year it was April 1st, and I was not quite ready. So, because the audit wrapped up later this year.
And as, you know, a wonderful government attorney that I used to be, I know that most communities, this is what they do. They wait till their audit's done so they can figure out their timing, but that isn't what the statutes say. You do know that, right?
Well, yeah, and other places will amend as they go.
Yeah,
but
it's like
yeah.
they do one almost before the end of the year, because that's when it's supposed to be done, and then they'll do this
Yeah.
like a catch-up later. Okay.
But
You
one
don't do the
key-
first step, right? You don't
Correct.
do that first one. You just
Yeah.
wait until your audit's done and you know where these
Yeah,
need to
I
be
think-
changed. Okay.
The thought being, for efficiency.
I mean,
I mean,
there's no
this is-
penalty in the statute.
Yeah,
It just says you're
right.
supposed to
I
do
mean,
that.
this is the practice that has been here for many
Yeah,
years.
this has
Yeah,
actually become pretty standard for
yeah.
local governments all over.
but good point.
Well, it's a moot point because it doesn't matter
Yeah,
anymore.
and some
right?
places don't even amend their budget and they
Right.
let it go with overages, so.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Renee. Well done, by the way.
Yeah.
I would recommend approval of this resolution if everybody's done asking questions.
Well, we've got a motion,
I'll second.
and we've got a second by Paul. Any additional discussion or questions? Not seeing any? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries as well, and that leaves us with one remaining motion, I believe.
I'll make the motion that we adjourn,
A motion?
and April 15th is celebration's about to begin.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you.